Hello and welcome to another key lesson. This is part 3 of building Gotenks. This one is going to be about deciding on cards through lessons learned testing. First, let's take a look at how my build is now, and then I'll talk about how I got there. If you haven't seen part 2, it's about card ratios, and here's the link. Here's what the deck was looking at the end of that video. You'll notice there's no Gogeta unisons, and that is simply because at the time I didn't have any. In general, I don't like to build a deck around cards I don't own. If money is no object for you, feel free to, but personally for me, I don't want to commit to shaping a deck around a card that turns out to be too expensive to buy singles of. With COVID making my income uncertain at the moment, I certainly can't afford to build like that. Not to mention, at this rate, set 11 will be out before I actually get to play this deck. Would feel very bad to have spent that much money on it. As it turns out though, the Gogetas weren't too expensive, so I've bought 3. Just need 1 more. Here is my build now. The new cards added are Gogeta, SS3 Goku, Tournament Pack Goten, Pan, and Kefla. Gogeta, as I said, was only not in there because I didn't have any, but he is a necessary card. My deck is now at 60. Most decks that would feel like too much, but for Gotenks I think it's okay. Some matchups will have you drawing more than others, thanks to Gotenks' leader ability of drawing when your opponent uses an extra card, and when it's not, is when Gogeta comes in handy. I talked about this a little bit in part 2, but what you want to do in that case is thin the deck out. So drop 2, draw 2 is very useful. And ideally, you're dropping the Goten and Trunks, they can be retrieved from the drop when you need to. The deck is happy to be tapped out. The SS4 Vegeta and Release from Evil can be used for no energy if a unison is on board. Time Magic can use Sparking if needed, and I only have 3 cards that will cost energy to combo with. Gogeta's permanent help makes this work. I still have the Broly unison in the deck, and he is useful depending on what you need him for. But once I have a 4th copy of Gogeta, I'll put Broly down to 2. I've swapped out Son Goku Adventure into the Unknown for SS3 Son Goku The Last Straw. So I've swapped a critical 15k for a double strike. Generally, I prefer the critical for early game pressure, but these days the double strike is more useful when dealing with unisons. So Tournament Pack Goten. I don't have many Tournament Pack cards because my locals aren't running, thanks COVID. So to make up for that, my locals has been giving out a couple of Tournament Packs with purchases. So I scored 1 Goten, and he's worth having in the deck. An extra negate that could be found by Pan or Trunks the Eager, and can be used as fusion material, and can be used as an attacking battle card. Pan and Kefla. These were some ideas I had that I talked about in part 1, but I didn't find enough room for them in the deck until the Gogeta Unison opened up the deck thinning strategy. So Pan, you're probably more likely to hardcast her than to actually use her ability to come out for free. So dual attack with Gotenks going all out, and then use Pan to restand him and dual attack again. I have a few ways in the deck to rest battle cards, like Gohan and Broly, and a few ways to KO rested battle cards, like Gotenks Power Fusion and Burning Kamehameha and Broly. But Kefla can do both. She can feel a little bit expensive at 2 energy and dropping 1 card, but her flexibility is pretty useful. I dropped a Burning Kamehameha to fit her into the deck, but it might be worth maxing her out. Okay, so that's the latest changes out of the way. Let's talk about testing. I would say that there's 2 main focuses when you're testing. First, you test just to get a feel for the deck and how it plays, and then you want to fine-tune it by testing against meta decks. As I tested to get a feel for it, I played it against the decks that I already had built, which were Invoker, Vegito, Pan, Gogeta, Gohan, and let's say a mirror match. I'm not going to give that one away because I might make a video about it soon. Early on, I decided that Son Goku Absolute Annihilation didn't really need to be in the deck, although he's definitely a sideboard consideration for Invoker matchups. I mentioned this in the last video, but I tried putting the Goten and Trunkses at a lower number and I instantly felt it was less consistent, so I'm keeping them at 8 and 8. Gotenks Power of Fusion versus Overwhelming Might. I've talked about this before as well, but I would like Power of Fusion to be at 4 and Overwhelming Might at 2. I see a lot of people cutting Overwhelming Might completely, but I don't think you should sleep on him. He's pretty useful. He can deal with blockers, he can deal with Sin Shenron. I decided Bardock the Enlightened wasn't necessary. It felt a little bit too expensive to pay 2 energy for him. Zamasu Super Combo, I didn't really like that either. It doesn't give a draw. Gohan gives a draw, and you can pay energy if you want to put him on the field to rest something, so he's almost as good. And because my deck is mono yellow, I can run Kefla. Once you've got a feel and you're ready to refine it, you might want to test it against more meta decks, or decks you're going to likely see at your locals. If you need to, use deck profiles and proxies to build them. I've built a Sin Shenron deck and a Vegex deck, as well as Ginyu, and I'm going to build a Frieza deck and maybe one of the Earthling decks as well. At this point, you might have your main board sorted, and you might only be thinking about what you need to build your sideboard out of. Depending on what you expect to see at your locals, or if you're going to a big tournament, you might decide on some main board changes. Testing against these decks will also help you work out how you might need to sequence differently against different decks. Against Sin, I learned that it's better to have Broly Unison out and use Gotenks Overwhelming Might to negate Sin Shenron's effects. And against Vegex, I decided to go Vegeta Unison better to give that extra defense, and it's better to put out double strikers like Gotenks Power Fusion. Try to either kill or reduce the markers on their unison. I've still got more testing to do because I haven't built Frieza and all that yet. So I'll leave this video here, but before I go, let's talk about Secret Rare. I've given up hope on pulling Gotenks, so what I would put in my deck now is probably Big Smoke. Really, the only reason he's not in there right now is because he's sleeved up in another deck and I can't be bothered swapping him out. However, soon I should have my hands on Sin Shenron, Negative Energy Incarnate. He's the most accessible secret rare in this game because he's giving out for free just as entry for store champs. If you're in the situation like me where no store champs are running thanks to COVID, well, hopefully your locals is doing some sort of deal. If you buy a product, they'll hand him out as well. He should be pretty useful in my deck as it's built right now. I have 10 1-drops, so potentially I could pay 1 energy to play him and he's a great defense. That's the end of the Gotenks series. I'm pretty happy with the deck as it is right now. I just need to work out a sideboard. But hopefully these videos have helped you with your own deck building. They have been a little bit rambling just all over the place as I build Gotenks. But in the future I will be doing videos focused on specific parts of deck building. So subscribe if you'd like to see them, and I'll see you then.